Hello, welcome back to the Nancecast. Good to see you. How you doing? This episode, I'm joined by a couple of homies. You should know them by now. Mikey and Sean. Michael Downs of the Dangerous Maybe, and Sean Mittle Stat. I don't know. I can't say his name. I can't spell his name either. That's why the episode with him, the first episode with Sean, is called Sean in the Middle, because I can't spell his last name, and I don't know how to say it, but I know it's cool. It looks cool. It's a cool name. You got a good name, Sean. Good job. They come on and we talked about narcissism and perversion and structural narcissism, and kind of why would you even want to try to do this, like assign a clinical structure to the social field or, society or the big other, or why would you, like, why? What's going on? What are you doing? Yeah, and I think it's important. I think it's actually a very useful kind of lens to help flesh out ideas of what's going on. I think it's pretty evident to most people anyway, that something wicked this way comes. Here in the shadow of the dark future rapidly approaching, it seems like things are a little bit out of control. I know I, for one, am just horrified when I look up from my screens and, I go outside and I pay attention to what's going on. Actually, that's not necessarily true. I think when I look at the screens, it's horrifying. But when I go outside and, I go in the real world meat space, it does, in fact, seem a bit less horrifying than the screens make it out to seem. Yeah, good episode. Talking a lot. I actually got to sit back a lot and just observe kind of conversation with Mikey and Sean. That was very nice. I'm sure you'll enjoy that, dear reader. I know I did. And then we kind of, wrap up the episode with some, speculation or some forward thinking or something like that. Try not to go all the way down the doomer chute. And yeah, I think it's important to not give in, not resign yourself to the doom. I think it's okay to be nihilistic. I think it's okay to be pessimistic. But don't let either of those things become like a fetishized version of just giving up and giving in. I do think it's important to try to find a hill to die on. I think for me personally, that hill that at least I'm, climbing up now, we'll see if I make it, is the notion of, the human. And that's kind of predicated on subjectivity. That's not necessarily connected to the form so much as it is the content, subjectivity. And that's kind of what, we've been talking about, Mikey and I, with AI and intelligence and consciousness and sentience and subjectivity and stuff like that. And I think what Sean is bringing to the table is awesome. It's important. I know after the call, I actually reached out to Sean twice after the fact, just to let him know, like, some dots connected themselves in my brain using this lens of these, clinical structures or, structural narcissism or perversion. So yeah, I think it's awesome. I enjoyed it. I'm sure you will as well. I'll go ahead and leave their info, Mikey and Sean, in the show notes, in case you're not already aware of these guys and following either one of them. You should be. And I will go ahead and get out of my own way and our way, and we'll be right back with another fantabulous episode of the Nancecast. We'll see you soon. Actually, I'll see you right now. I'll be right back in like 10 seconds with friends.
This is the best podcast ever! Nancecast! Welcome, you're listening to the Nancecast!
All right. Sean, what's up, man? And Mikey. Good to be back with
What's
you
up?
guys. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Pretty
Right.
good. Yeah.
So we're here to talk about society. I don't think it's absurd to claim society is all jacked up, and it feels like we're like on a runaway train. We're on a crash course with catastrophe. I think that's pretty evident to most people. But Sean, you just said it, you've been preoccupied with this question of what is the dominant pathology in society, or is there a dominant pathology in society, or are we all just kind of incomprehensible? And why does that matter? And I don't know, it's a really interesting question to me because I am usually more preoccupied with the material, which not to say you're not in the material. I think you are. But I'm thinking more along the lines of like metabolism and expenditure and bataille, and Mikey and I have been really focused on intelligence and consciousness and mind, and this pathology, accusing society of having a pathology. It's a big swing at the fences, for the fences, and I like it. But I mean, you could also ask, are you talking about society, or are you talking about tendencies and trends? And I don't know, but I'm very interested in what you're doing with narcissism. You have made me a lot more interested in Lash than I previously have been.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let me say then on that note that culture of narcissism is my starting point for this question. But after having spent like 2 weeks reading and rereading Seminar 4 of Lacan, I had my suspicions before that what Lash is talking about with pathological narcissism, whom he's drawing on. He's not a psychoanalyst himself. He's drawing on a number of different, mostly American thinkers, also like Melanie Klein, a bunch of different names. But after reading that seminar, which seems to be one of the ones more heavily focused on the notion of perversion, it seems like my suspicions are confirmed that like what Lash is getting at is the same thing that Zizek is getting at, or they're talking about the same phenomenon using different terms. Like that seems pretty obvious to me now after like really engaging more with Lacan. Like here's a quote from Melanie Klein, or no, this is a quote from The Culture of Narcissism. Lash says, Melanie Klein analyzed a 10-year-old boy who unconsciously thought of his mother as a vampire or a horrid bird and internalized this fear as hypochondria. Just that alone, like that's the same thing that Lacan is talking about with perversion, like and phobias, like the phobia, not with perversion exactly, but like with the phobia of the devouring creature, which is like a response to like a failure of castration for Lacan, or a denial of castration for Lacan. So yeah, so there's just too many commonalities between what Lash is addressing and what Lacan is addressing in perversion, and it seems like there's a clear reason for Lacan to not take up the idea of a pathological or a secondary narcissism because he explicitly in Seminar 4 rejects the idea of an omnipotence of thought, which seems to me to he's referring to Heinz Hartmann, an ego psychologist, or and he like explicitly rejects this idea, and he says that it's like the omnipotence has nothing to do with the child and has everything to do with the relation to the mother, or like the child's projection onto the mother, of this idea of omnipotence. So what I'm trying to say for now is really just that like it seems really obvious that they're talking about the same phenomena. They're using different terms, and I think perversion is actually probably a better way to go, to be more accurate in talking about what we're talking about. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know if what you guys have to think about that for now, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Would
But I guess
yeah.
maybe I should say too that like what is the point? Like why does this matter? And I think my starting point to this is like looking at like how hard it is to actually like organize people in the world we live in, and that recognizing that historically that just was not the case. I think this is where I started thinking about this so much is because like in Marx's time or in Freud's time, people just spontaneously organized themselves into like fraternal organizations or whatever all the time. Like it was so common. Like they were everywhere. You couldn't turn a corner without running into like some kind of fucking lodge or some kind of like some kind of organization, you know, like and now we see these like decaying halls, like empty Masonic lodges or like empty Knights of Pythias lodges, where the only people who go there, just two random examples, are like, you know, 95 years old and no young people are turning up to them. Like this was kind of my starting point for the whole thing is like, why is it so hard to organize people now when once upon a time people just spontaneously organized themselves all the time? You know, so again, this is why the idea of narcissism, I was like, well, this sounds interesting, but I've come now to think that like maybe narcissism, there is a narcissism at work in what's going on with people for sure, but that's a secondary phenomenon, I think, to what the root of it is, and that is, I think Lacan is getting at in Perversion. So I'm agreeing with Zizek on that we live in a perverse time. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'll cede the floor. What are you guys thinking when listening to all that?
So narcissism, in our previous conversation, you broke it down in a way that I liked it a lot, where it's like you find yourself in this free floating state and you kind of create this identity out of whole cloth, and you assert that it is yours and you created it, and you reject like the social and the conditions around it, and you retreat into it. And I like that. Like that makes sense. It does seem to be the case that we are all living in hell, and there is no social. There is nothing to latch onto when it comes to identity. So we do have to kind of construct our own identities. And lot of,
if you'll remember, like it's almost like it's that, but it's almost like it's the opposite of that at the same time.
Yeah,
It's like it's almost like right. It's almost like the invasion of the social, like the social or the public is too much, and so it's like, you know what I mean. And so there's this contradictory sort of notion inherent in it.
Yeah. Well, because like back in the day when we had actual communities and we had more social infrastructure, the public was a real place. And now like the postmodern public that we have today, I mean, you've said it's the market. Like the public is the market, not it's being marketized or what, like it just is now. And I think, yeah, when you live in the world where you're never disconnected from your fantasy, like you can have it all, everything, like the commodity reigns supreme. There is no prohibition in general for the most part. That's not to say like necessarily, but it does seem to be the case that we do live in the world where you can have it all and you can have it immediately, and there's no wait, there's no negation, there's no prohibition. It's just go, 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 go. All you have to do is buy this. All you have to do is spend money on this thing. Like the public that is invading us and overwhelming us is qualitatively different from the public of yesteryear. And I think that's true. And
Well, I would almost just say that the public is like the public invades the private. Like there's no private. Like I have a camera in my house.
Yeah.
Like voluntarily I put that there. So it's like the public, which has always been the market, right, has like just become so fucking big and so invasive into our lives that it makes it really difficult to figure out where the public ends and where the private begins even. And it doesn't help that we have this conception that we usually rely on of like private versus public property or something. It kind of just obscures the entire thing. Because it's like, no, like the market is the public. You know what I mean? Like these are just legal distinctions. But I think that the emergence of the narcissism and like the way in which that emerges is like that's what kind of like I'm changing my perspective on or like coming to understand better or more clear through Lacan because I
Mm.
think that like because Lacan talks about perversion as like this failure of castration. It's almost like the presence of the mother being like too intense, and being like there's no separation from the mother, sort of like he uses that. I think is it in Seminar 11, Mikey? You'll probably be able to correct me. Is it in Seminar 11 where he uses the thing with the phallus keeping the mouth of the crocodile open?
I'm actually think that's seminar 17.
Okay, yeah, wherever it comes from, like this idea of the devouring mother. This comes up both in Lash and in Lacan. From different, they're drawing on different sources. Sometimes they both talk about Winnicott, right? So sometimes they're actually crossing paths. They also both talk about Heinz Hartmann, and both kind of critically, actually. So they're crossing paths. They're not directly referencing each other, of course, but this thing is still this devouring mother. This sort of thing is very clear in both places. It's coming up in both places. They're both really concerned about this problem, you know. And so so it seems to be in both cases it's an issue of like it has to do with castration or rejecting castration, a denial of castration, something like this. And so when we have another wrinkle when we get to like generalizing this to the level of society. What does that mean? And this is what I really like Lash for. Lash, it, I don't think it's an alien concept to psychoanalysis that you would think that like, oh, society, what's happening in society, what's happening in the social is going to like change individual subjectivity. And so Lash is really good at looking at society and being like, well, what is changing in society that would produce these things that would happen at the level of the individual that then psychoanalysts themselves would pick up on, you know? And so this public, this increase of the public, what is going on there? It's almost like the corporation is our over permissive mother. You know what I mean? The corporation itself and the narcissistic part, the reason why this kind of does fit with the perversion is that the narcissism is like, well, what is happening in perversion? You are seeing yourself as like here I have a quote here. So something a note I wrote is perversion is a denial of one's castration and insistence that the mother really does have the phallus, is omnipotent, that what follows logically, like she does possess it. What follows logically from that omnipotence is that the perverse subject is merely an extension of their mother. That is, the pervert considers themselves in a regressive way to still be the phallus for the mother, the object which completes her by fully satisfying her desire. Something like this. So perhaps Mikey, you might know even more than I do, have been able to like, cobble together when it comes to perversion. Does it sound like I'm talking about the right thing?
So I like this idea of how you're connecting narcissism and perversion on the basis of some sort of trouble accepting castration. But I guess for me, so as Lacan moves along in the seminars,
Yeah.
he's going to eventually develop the concept of objet petit a, and then he's going to start, which is his core concept, and he says, I think in the non-dupair seminar, that it's the one thing that he has invented.
Hmm.
So he views it as his key contribution to theory. Um, the thing is with narcissism versus perversion, I think what they do is different though, because the way I would see it is narcissism based on, even like I was reading up on Lash. I was rereading your paper. I also watched an intro to Lash that Daniel Tutt did that was really good. And so I see now, like, yeah, I think that Lash was on to something. I see why you guys both think he needs to be brought back and thought through anew. I think the difference is with narcissism, what the narcissist does is focus on their ideal ego,
Hmm.
which is to say they fixate on themselves, they fixate on what they want to achieve, what they want to do, etc. The pervert is different because it's not primarily the ego that's playing the determining role in what they're doing. It's the relationship to the big other. And so one's focused on ideal ego, which individualizes, puts you. But the point is with narcissism is where it would be you don't really care about the social. You're not really invested in what's going on in the social field at all. You're just concerned with yourself. Where the pervert, as Lacan develops it, the pervert is very much interested in what's going on in the social field. And the reason being is because the pervert is certain that they know what's best for everybody else. And so the pervert is the one who believes that they're the instrument of the 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 big other. And so you're right, like Freud talked about this in terms of the mother and the phallus, and for somebody who's not familiar with this stuff, it seems abstract. But what it boils down to is like a child early on realizes that the mother it is not fully complete, uh, and this a kid can either accept this and go, okay, I can't have this perfect unity with my mom. I have to move on and start caring about things beyond her, and she's not going to be fully complete in me. I'm not going to be fully complete in her. I have to accept this, and I have to find replacements or substitute, and that's what a neurotic does, whether
Hmm.
be it obsessional or hysterical. They have different strategies about how to do this, but this is what a neurotic does. The pervert, on the other hand, recognizes a lack in the mother, then disavows it and cannot accept it. So what this, if we want to think of perversion and neurosis as almost existential dispositions, what the pervert ends up doing is thinking that they are the instrument that can bring about the fullness of society. And they
Hmm.
always think they're doing this on the basis of some sort of knowledge. It's not their whim. They think they're just serving an external authority and they're just the instrument of it. So that's where I see this difference, where the narcissist retreats into the ego, which fragments and puts the narcissist or the narcissist at a distance from the social. The pervert is the one operating within the social who thinks he or she, typically he, knows what is best for everyone else and is acting on the basis of certainty. So where do we see this? We see
So,
this on with the vast majority of people online who are engaging in the culture war or have been
mm,
engaging in the culture war, where it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. What you find is that you have a bunch of people who know what's absolutely best for everyone else.
mhm. And we also see this in the corporate executive too, I feel like somebody who has like zero guilt about like devastating neighborhoods or whatever or
Yeah,
zero guilt about, increasing the price of cancer drugs, things like this, you know.
yeah, because they know what's best for society as a
Yeah.
whole.
But those people, I think that Lash would have described as pathologically narcissistic, whereas Lacan would describe the same people as perverse. This is the point I'm getting at. Like I think
Yeah,
that
but
this is what Lash is concerned about, is the same type of people with the same type of symptoms. It's just that they're getting off on different foots because like it seems like based on Seminar 4 that Lacan explicitly rejects the idea of a regression to narcissism. This is not the way he wants to think about what's happening. It's a regression, but it's a regression to what he calls perversion, you know.
And the reason for that is because he, at this period, especially at Seminar 4, this is his middle period, if we talk like that, and he's focused on the symbolic. And during this period, he wants to emphasize the differences between the imaginary and the symbolic. For somebody who's new and doesn't know this, the imaginary basically has to do with the field of perceptions. It's not usually talked about like that, but that's what we're getting at. But it's not the way that Merleau-Ponty or a empiricist like Hume or Locke would describe the field of perceptions. For Lacan, the imaginary field has to do with privileged images that the subject identifies with or disidentifies with. And the main one, of course, is our image in the mirror, our imago, right? And so for Lacan, he thinks that there can be these imaginary relationships where people fight over, oh, you look too much like me, you're a threat to me. Oh, I like you because you look like me. Like it's all this kind of dumb shit we do on the basis of our appearances, right? Whereas the symbolic has to do with the social field or our system of meaning, which is a much bigger, broader dynamic, because the point is the social field is the mediating third. So I exist over here, I have my self-image, somebody exists over there, they have their self-image, and we can kind of have a conflict between ourselves. If this gets worked out or anything, it's because we come to mediate the situation through identifying with higher. Oh, you believe in individual freedom. Great. And so this third field or system of meaning that we are all part of, it shifts from dealing with each other at the perceptual imaginary level into identifying or disidentifying at the level of, oh, you're not a Christian. Well, that's not something that's perceivable by looking at somebody. That has to do with their position within society and what their beliefs are. So for Lacan, he thinks that what fundamentally determines a person's disposition, subjective disposition, has to do with how they relate to castration and to the law, which all are symbolic, right? It doesn't have to do with the imaginary. So if you're a psychotic, if you're a neurotic, or you're a pervert, it's based on a certain relationship you've taken up towards the law, and not with your imago, not with your image in the mirror.
Right.
And so that's why he wouldn't want narcissism to be considered one of these clinical structures, because if we go with the standard definition of narcissism, which is fixation with one's self-image, that would have to be in the imaginary opposed to the symbolic. But I think what you're saying is Lash isn't just going to use this term narcissism in this strict way with this distinction between imaginary and symbolic.
Yeah, because and you've done a lot more, read Lacan a lot more widely than I have. So, but it seems to me, based on what I've read about Lacan and what I read of Lacan, that like Lacan never returns to this idea of like of a secondary narcissism. This is something that Klein does, several other Kohut does, but it's not a thing that Lacan ever does. I think.
Yeah, and I mean, look, nowadays, I mean, this is something I wanted to get your thoughts on too. I mean, I have close friends who now think of people in terms of them being a narcissist and covert narcissist, all this kind of jargon. And one of my friends in particular knows this stuff really well. And I see how it makes sense of how certain people behave.
Yeah.
Right. So it's getting at something important.
Yeah, it is.
And so for me, somebody who's got a Lacanian, Zizekian philosophical orientation, it's like, okay, so what do I do with what's being called narcissism? Because it's not really reducible to any of the three main Lacanian clinical structures. But at the same time, there's something to it. So, a lot of Lacanians would just, it's not important because it doesn't fit our conceptual scheme. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Sometimes something's happening. You gotta think it through.
Yeah.
And I do get this thing of how pathological narcissism's something happening. The thing you and I, we've talked about this before though, and then you get in this whole thing. Okay, so if we take pathological narcissism, tell me if you'll go for this. We can also re-term it as pathological individualism. Would you go for that?
Yeah, I think I think that one of the results of the underlying psychical structure that is going on underneath the surface in whatever we're calling it, pathological narcissism, is a false individualism. Like that's almost one of the symptoms or something that comes out of it is like a
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And so if we think in terms of Lacan for a second, the work of Dwayne Rousseau and Mark Gerard Murphy, these guys who are focused on the later Lacan,
Hmm.
they seem to be getting at a pathological individualism too,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
except for them, and this is where things get a little bit more conceptually complicated.
Yeah.
It's not the ego that this individualist would be fixated on, it would be some idiosyncratic enjoyment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the reason I kind of want to complicate this situation here because I think it gets us to think it complicates it for a minute, but I think if we think through it, it starts to give us more ways of thinking about what's going on with different people because the ego and jouissance are they belong in two different registers. One's imaginary, one's real. But the pervert would be a relationship to the symbolic. And it's weird. It's so basically like you
Mm-hmm.
can have the pervert who thinks they're the instrument of the big other. That has to do with the symbolic relation. You have one pathological individualist who's completely fixated with their self-image. And then you have one that might not seem to fixate on their image whatsoever, but instead they're fixated on a certain routine or circuit or pattern of enjoyment. And it seems like these all three of these are things that I see operative within society right now. But they all problematize the social bond is what the key point would be. They
Mm-hmm.
problematize us having any sort of shared social duty or identity that is
Yeah.
bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And like one of the things that I think about is like, it's almost like you can't like I think which direction to go with this. Like, yeah, it's almost like you can't organize a group without it becoming a cult in the world we live in. Like, like that's why people don't want to be in parts of groups is because like we know deep down like it's gonna end up a cult, you know? So
Mhm.
it seems like there's these Marxist organizations that pop up all the time, like these little factional Marxist organizations, for one example. And they become cults really fucking quickly, like all the time, you know? And so it's almost like we don't know. It's you either if we're gonna come together, it's gonna be a cult, or it's gonna be not coming together at all. You know what I mean?
I mean, that
So
seems to be the sad state of affairs we're in, right?
yeah, so it's like the problem of there's something about our subjectivity. It's like the hysterics that Freud talks about. I've never fucking met a person like this. Are you kidding? Like, I'm only exaggerating a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, the problem we have is just so obviously not. It does not come down to like, oh, I've like overconformed and I have symptoms because I've overconformed to my duty or something
Mhm.
like this, you know? Or the only time that does happen is in a cult. You know, the only time that does happen where someone is in some way overconforming is when they're like, um, they see themselves as like the right hand of power, and they like idolize this leader that they are like can barely distinguish themselves from. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like, which of course that happened in like the 20th century, like that happens in fascism, for instance, but like other things happen too. You know what I mean? So it's like it seems like it's the problems we're dealing with now are different, you know. It's either you get a culture, you get nothing. You get no social organization whatsoever, you know. And so it's like I the issue of like and I do want to defend the idea of narcissism because I think like implicitly this is why I see them working really well together, even if like perversion might be more technically correct. And this is why I see them as similar. Because like I want to defend the idea of narcissism in that, well, a pervert is absolutely going to be narcissistic. They're going to see themselves as in a sense, like they're going to have like they're going to see if you see yourself as the big other itself enjoying. Like it's hard to not see that as in some sense kind of narcissistic.
Well,
You know
but
what I
that's
mean?
here. This is a good point. Let me read this quote I found.
Mhm.
Okay, hold on. There we go. Where, no, if it'll bring it up. There we go. Okay, so this is from seminar 11.
Hmm.
Lacan says, strictly speaking, hold on. What is it doing? Okay, that was weird. There we go. Sorry.
Hmm.
All right. Strictly speaking, perversion is an inverted effect of the fantasy. It is the subject who determines himself as an object in his encounter with the division of subjectivity or lack, castration. It is insofar as the subject makes himself the object of another will that the sadomasochistic drive not only closes up, but constitutes itself. The sadist himself occupies the place of the object, but without knowing it, to the benefit of another, for whose jouissance he exercises his action as sadistic pervert.
Hmm.
Now, okay, so a couple things need to be clarified here. So when he says the perversion is an inverted effect of the fantasy. Okay, so the standard formula for fantasy for Lacan is little bard or bard s with the login sign, the diamond symbol, and then objet petit a, which would be subject in relation to the object. But what you're going to get with the pervert is something like little a, which is the object, in relation to barred a or a, depending on how you want to represent it, which is the other. So it's like the fundamental structure has reversed. So instead of you being the desiring subject trying to attain the thing that'll make you happy, you have reified yourself and reduced yourself to being an instrument or in the service of
Mhm.
some
Right.
big other.
And this is perfect because it perfectly gets at the paradox that is happening in pathological narcissism because it's both the minimal self and the omnipotent self at the same time. You know, like there's this here's this other quote I have where should I start it? Because narcissism, this is from Lash, this is from The Minimal Self, his book, the chapter, The Ideological Assault on the Ego. Because narcissism knows no distinction between self and others, it expresses itself in later life both in the desire for ecstatic union with others, as in romantic love, and in the desire for absolute independence from others, by means of which we seek to revive the original illusion of omnipotence and to deny our dependence on the external sources of nourishment and gratification. The technological project of achieving independence from nature embodies the solipsistic side of narcissism, just as the desire for a mystical union with nature embodies its symbiotic and self-obliterating side. Since both spring from the same source, the need to deny the fact of dependence, it can only cause confusion to call the dream of technological omnipotence a masculine obsession. Anyway, I think we got most of the important point there. Like, this idea is really self-contradictory and intentionally in Lash in what he's getting at. And Do you see what I mean? That there's an omnipotence and there's also a dependence, a terror of dependence. I mean, what does this sound like? But like anguish, castration anguish. This sounds to me like
Yeah,
castration anguish. You know what I
you're
mean?
right. I
Which is
mean,
what
you're right.
Lacan refers to with fetishism and perversion. You know?
I agree.
Yeah.
It is getting at this kind of relationship where, on the one hand, you have a subject who is all too willing to accept its own lack, and because it fine, but it won't accept the lack. The other can't not be omnipotent, which another
Mm.
word to say that the other has to be uncastrated, unbarred, full. But the problem is for the pervert, the mechanism is fetishistic disavowal. It's both.
Hmm.
It's both and not at the same. So the point is, I know very well that the other is lacking, but nevertheless, I'm going to comport myself in such a way to make the other non-lacking.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that you see this example. So let's here's a Zizek quote. This is from How to Read Lacan.
Mm.
Zizek says, "A true Stalinist politician loves mankind, yet carries out horrible purges and executions. His heart is breaking while he does it, but he cannot help it. It is his duty towards the progress of humanity. This is the perverse attitude of adopting the position of the pure instrument of the big other's will. It is not my responsibility. It is not me who is really doing it. I am merely the instrument of the higher historical necessity. The obscene enjoyment of this situation is generated by the fact that I conceive of myself as exculpated for what I am doing. I am able to inflict pain on others with the full awareness that I am not responsible for it, that I merely fulfill the other's will. The sadistic pervert answers the question, how can the subject be guilty when he merely realizes an objective, externally imposed necessity by subjectively assuming this objective necessity, by finding enjoyment in what is imposed on him. And so
Mm.
this is more of this dynamic of somebody going, look, I know exactly. It's this weird disavow thing. America is great and always has been great, but it needs to be made great again.
Mm.
And I know how to make it great again. It just has to be done. I'm the one who has
Yeah.
access to the knowledge, and it isn't me. It's not my whim. It's not my idiosyncratic desire. It's external necessity, and this is the only way to do it.
Hmm.
And I'm just an instrument, an object to that
Right.
being. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me that's not our relationship to corporate capitalism. Like, tell me that there's not a similarity between like Stalinism and corporate capitalism in that way. Like, this is the only alternative. It's like, it's like it's maybe not identical, but it seems like that in both cases you have this expansive bureaucracy, s- and a sense of the inevitability, a sense of the powerlessness within it and like ourselves as extension of it. There seems like there's something to do with this, whatever we're calling this perversion, narcissism, and that happens when bureaucracy has run amok. You know what I mean? This could
But
this
then you,
Oh,
but
go
you
ahead.
also have like I mean, so the, the lonely consumer, let's talk
Mm,
like that for a second. So
sure.
the lonely consumer who has not, it doesn't participate in any of the, the social in any meaningful sense, basically just lives their life, goes home, from work, watches Netflix, repeats, and yet is constantly filled with a type of existential despair over the
Hmm.
whole situation. Um, so like I wouldn't view that person as
Mm,
a pervert,
yeah.
but I could see them being viewed as it's like a structural narcissist, like a narcissist who doesn't even want to be a narcissist, but doesn't know how to be anything other than a
Yeah.
narcissist because the structure of the system has determined it. And I mean, the whole thing, critics of capitalism will also always talk about atomization. I think part of what we're talking about is that process, that the
Yeah.
system itself atomizes us, and it's not some moral failure or even pathological shortcoming on particular psyches. It's
Yeah.
also a structural dynamic that pushes people in this
Yeah.
direction.
Totally, and that is what Lash is getting at. Like he's like, I think the really bad, lazy criticism of him is that he's a moralizing conservative who wants people to like pull themselves up by their psychological bootstraps, and that's like that's the that's the lazy and commonplace critique of Lash, and it's just dumb because that's not what he's saying at all. What he's saying is something. It's structural narcissism. That's what cultural narcissism is to him.
Yeah.
But I think like. But it's not simply about what you said about the consumer, the Netflix binger. That's all they have. That's all they do is whatever. Well, that's social, right? That's a social activity. The issue is that
Sure.
like, you know what I mean? But it's like,
But it's not social in the sense of working in the name of a bigger cause to change society. It's not
mm,
in that sense. It's just
yeah,
a hesitant resignation to one's atomized,
mhm.
lonely existence.
And precisely, it's like society has been deliberately organized in such a way, um, like we are connected in such a way as to be disconnected, is the way I like to think about it. You know what I mean? Like we are we are hyper connected, more connected than ever before within the internet age in so many ways. And we have like actually, if we're including engaging with these like products, we're in a sense like more social than ever before, like hyper connected. But it's that intense connection through mediated through our devices and such, that's part of what keeps us disconnected also, you know.
Yeah.
But in there, and I do think that there's kind of a sense of like it might be what's the word, like a resigned sense of inevitability. Like that is so common, I think, in American cultural life, the sense of you can't fight progress. Like like I was talking to a neighbor I had when I lived in Pittsburgh, and it was like talking about how they ripped up all of the tram lines that used to go up into that neighborhood, and just in the 70s they just ripped them up and took them out, and his attitude was like, yeah, you can't fight progress, that's just the way it is. And now like the transportation situation in and out of that neighborhood is just fucking shit, it just sucks. But in the 70s they decided they didn't need that shit anymore, and they tore up all that infrastructure that was already there, you know what I mean? And so it's like we are. So there is like definitely, I think, in American life, this sense of like the inevitability of capital, the inevitability of neoliberalism, the inevitability of these things. And it's not that the person who's like in the way of these infrastructural projects, it's not like that person individually is a pervert, but like what about the people, like, like but there's something structural going on with our relationship to the inevitability of these things, like that they must happen, you
Well,
know.
and see, part of what's interesting about what you're working on, Sean, is
Mm,
that it really opens up this whole question. How much can a society or a specific institution have a clinical structure? And so Lacan made these concepts or refined them, because some may come from Freud too. He refined them to apply to individuals in the clinic speaking about their desires, speaking about themselves, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so you get the certain types of Lacanians who think, oh, this only applies in the clinic. You can't say that a certain institute is perverse. Problem is, you do see these dynamics working in more than just speaking individuals in the clinic, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so Zizek has done this for years, and Todd sees it, and uh, Dwayne Russell and Mark Murphy, they know that this stuff has a broader impact on society than just, the speaking subject.
And some psychoanalysts, I think, see this too.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think what would have to be thought, and this is like an actual, like, would necessitate a book long treatise or intervention on this. But the question is to say, all right, if individuals are still neurotics on an everyday, more or less, the vast majority of people are neurotics, but they're constantly having to navigate a larger pervert dynamic or a larger, and we can get more specific, sadist, masochist, fetishist, or certain, a psychotic. There's a generalized foreclosure, right? To talk like the later Lacan and Jacques Millier.
Hmm.
Basically, what is this dynamic between an individual clinical structure and a broader institutional clinical structure, and how does my individual clinical structure, so if I am obsessional but I'm in a clinical or I'm in an institutional dynamic where that is either, sadist, like how do these, the individual and the institution, how does that affect each other is what I'm saying, and I've never seen anybody really
I
think that
think
through.
I think what it is like that you have to be I think what it is that you have to be a pervert to get ahead. Or in Lash's terms, you have to be a narcissist to get ahead. Like what I mean by the dominant pathology, like I think what people are getting at is like when it comes to like a
Patrick
structural
Bateman.
yeah, yeah, exactly. No, totally, Patrick Bateman. Like is like a structural pathology is what is being asked of you by the big other. Who is the big other asking you to be? It's not even that there's a majority of people who are perverts or narcissists or something. It's that like what subjective structure is the order in which we live asking of us? You know, and I think that the corporate capitalist world is asking something of us. Is not asking us to care about tradition or community. It's definitely not asking us to care about those things. It's asking us to care about our own individual enjoyment, and it's asking us to care about getting out of the way of it, and it's asking us to aid and abet its progress. You know. I think that's kind of what the idea of like a structural sort of like narcissism or something is sort of getting at is what is being demanded of us. How are we being asked to comport ourselves psychologically to the world and to the economy?
Well, and I mean, so in a piece that I've written, I haven't released it yet, but I try to show this homology, or this dynamic. Both have similar structures, which is to say, uh, the circuit of capital accumulation has the same structure to it as the circuit of the superegoic enjoyment imperative, right? Um, so much so that I would just say that the superego is the voice of capital.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Zizek kind of implicitly figured that out, but I've never seen him explicitly just say, no, what happens is, um, this thing called the superego, basically at the social level, just has gotten turned into the imperative to consume, the
Mm-hmm.
imperative to enjoy. And it's this whole thing of, if you're not happy in the society that you're living in, then you need to feel guilty because it's your fault, and it
Mm-hmm.
individualizes us in this
Yeah.
sense. And this is the therapism move, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is to destructure the situation. Don't think in terms of the structure of the economy. Think in terms of individual pathologies, individual responsibility, and that's it. Because the message is, you live in a society that is based around making you happy and satisfying your needs. So if you're not happy here, the problem's with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you should feel guilty about being an unappreciative
Yeah.
failure in your society. And so
Yeah.
that seems to be the message underlying the whole thing.
And the superego plays super large in both Perversion with Lacan and right, and it also it plays a very significant role in the culture of narcissism too. Even though he's not working on the Lacanian definition of superego, um, it's clear for Lash that he sees this like weirdly he doesn't quite know what to make of it. That chapter is like kind of left open ended, where he's like, what is the superego asking of us? All we can tell for sure is it's demanding something. It's like in your face. It's so painful. But
So it
like,
demands enjoyment, but the problem is,
yeah,
what does that mean?
right.
What enjoy how? Enjoy what? I mean, the point is, it's the master signifier of the superego, right?
Hmm.
And but the point is, a master signifier doesn't have any meaning. So yeah, I mean, we when we hear the word enjoy, there's a flicker of some sort of meaning, but does it have a specific concrete meaning the way dog or car or tree? Like we know what those words refer to, right?
Hmm.
We don't have problem. But if somebody says enjoy, uh, okay, and what are we talking about?
Hmm.
It's a spiritual enjoyment. So what would that be? Some sort of spiritual fulfillment? Are we talking about base pleasure? Are we talking about it? It's a completely open-ended question. All that you know is that you're supposed to be
Having a good
happy,
time. Yeah, you're
whatever,
supposed to be
having a
happy.
good time,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever that, and then whatever that actually means.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's interesting how that gets taken up differently depending on your class position too.
sure.
Like the uh I love the Tesla. Like I like the Tesla before it became associated with like big bad Elon Musk even was like it's such a it was because it's like it's designed minimalistically and it's an electric car, but it's also such an image of consumption, right? But it's an image of consumption that gets you to disavow consumption, right? Because it's because you totally trashed your old car before you needed to. Like I don't buy that you bought this brand new car and you needed it. You know what I mean? And that in order to buy that new car, it had to be like so much lithium mining had to take place, right? So like there's so much consumption in the Tesla, but because it's minimalistic and it's electric, you get to feel like, oh no, I'm better. I'm not consuming like those gas guzzlers who are keeping their beaters on the road. You know what I mean? So it's this disavowed consumption. And so like that class position, that like that's a different relationship or it's still consumption, but it's kind of a different uh perception on consumption than somebody who is like consumption to them is like buying a big gulp. Like that's consumption. You know what I mean? It's like but if you're in a higher class position, you get to disavow your consumption. Oh, I go to a farmer's market and buy like $17 fucking kale. You know, I'm not a consumer like that. I'm not like a
Yeah.
gauche consumer. You know,
A
it's my
Walmart consumer.
I'm not exactly. That's the image of consumerism. That's the dirty consumer, the Walmart consumer. But you can be like, oh, I'm a Whole Foods consumer. I'm not really consuming, you know?
Yeah, well, that's conscientious consumption, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it's just as it's just as like it's just in reality, like the lithium mining is destroying the fucking planet in reality, you know? So like there is no moral difference, but we get to disavow our consumption is my point, you know?
Well, I mean, it brings to mind Zizek's a great example of Starbucks back in the day where
Yeah.
if you buy our coffee, we donate X amount of the money to Guatemalan farmers to help them restore their communities and blah 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 blah. And so it's almost like uh, you're paying a fee for consumption in the very act of consumption that relieves you of having to feel guilty about consuming.
Totally, totally. Yeah. Yeah. And
What
so like
what
so
was
the
the
super
Roman
ego
Catholic
there.
Church? Remember the
Yeah.
Roman Catholic Church with Martin Luther when he
Hmm.
was some indulgences,
Hmm.
right? This is our modernized indulgences. Just pay
Right.
for the sin of consumption and the act of consumption and then go about your business.
But you brought up Martin Luther and that made me like the interesting thing about the super ego is like um isn't it super like isn't there enjoyment inherent in repression? Like if jouissance is like a buildup, like what is more enjoyable than repression itself?
Well,
Like what
that's
is
the problem with the people, the theorists that think that you can just do away with law, do away with the master signifier. This is Deleuze and Guattari.
Mhm.
This is a certain Marcuse, uh, Wilhelm Reich.
I'll defend Marcuse. I don't think that's what Marcuse is
You don't
saying,
think
but
like even in Eros and Civilization?
okay, maybe only because maybe
That's why a
he's like
certain
it's more
Marcuse.
underdeveloped, and then by the time he gets to like one-dimensional man, he's more. But
Yeah,
like, but
I
when
agree.
he's saying like polymorphous perversity, I don't think he means like no rules, enjoy. I don't think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, but you got to realize polymorphous perversity is also the state the child is in prior to law.
Yeah, it's
So
true. It's true that, and
that's the Freud that D and G like.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think that he's really getting at like a um I when I'm reading him, I think what he's saying, like it seems like he's saying to me that it's polymorphous perversity is for him more of like a love not focus. It's more like agape as opposed to eros. I think is really what he's getting at, you know.
I mean, I'd have to go back and look at it. That's a weird way to think about it. But
I know
I mean,
and that's why
polymorphous perversity for Freud is just,
yeah.
this material play of different parts of your body connecting to the world. That's why D and G take it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so it is a very bodily, libidinal state to be in,
Totally. I
opposed
think he
to
has
like
a
agape.
yeah, no, I think he does have a weird way of proceeding and a weird way of talking about things, and that's what lends himself to being misunderstood. But I do think if we um, give him another chance, he tends to be more. It tends to be more profitable, you know.
I'll say that I like One Dimensional Man more than Eros and Civilization.
I do too. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so the Lacanian, Zizekian, Magawian point is that
Mhm.
if you try to take away the obstacle, you lose the enjoyment. That
Mhm.
jouissance is built up through the
Yeah.
obstacle, and I mean objet is the obstacle. It's the point. The point is, why is objet the source of enjoyment? Because it's precisely the thing you can't get. So it builds up frustration, it builds up expectation, it
Yeah.
builds because you can't get the goddamn thing,
Mhm.
and that frustration, that expenditure of energy, all of that is based on how we actually enjoy, and it's based on an obstacle. And so, and not only that, law is structurally at play here. So the Lacanian position is, yeah, you can try in the name of enjoyment to undermine the law and undermine prohibition and undermine any barrier to enjoyment in the name of enjoyment. And you know what you're going to lose? Enjoyment itself.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
no, to bring
anyway.
it, but no, like, so look, I want, for a second, I just want to say, like, we've talked before. I've always had an interesting, I find my, okay, so the stuff that Roussel and Murphy have worked on
Mhm.
in relation to late Lacan
Yeah.
and Jacques-Alain Miller, this idea of now
Mhm.
we're saturated with jouissance and we are now islands of enjoyment, and it's this highly fragmented picture of society where everybody is a one and doesn't they don't nobody has a meaningful social bond anymore.
Mhm.
Everyone is structured around the circuits of their idiosyncratic enjoyment. That's what life is. There is no meaningful social bond anymore. uh and I think that, I mean, that gets at something important here too.
Totally.
um but I think Zizek honestly has this way of giving us an opportunity to connect narcissism in the sense of fixation with one's ideal ego to this thing with islands of jouissance, because in Ticklish Subject last chapter, he starts talking about what is going on with the decline of symbolic efficiency, with the role of the social bond, is you have a weird collusive circuit between the ego and jouissance. And it's as if focusing on one's ego is the source of jouissance here, and the source jouissance. It's like a positive feedback loop between the two. And he basically thinks that for us to understand this sense of lack of a social bond, we have to see it in terms of this dynamic that's now operative between the ego and idiosyncratic enjoyment.
Hmm. Yeah. So I have still not engaged with Dwayne Roussel in the way I
Oh, really?
want
Okay.
to eventually. But you said Jacques-Alain Miller. I have a quote from Jacques-Alain Miller right
Okay.
here. This is from his essay Ordinary Psychosis in 2008. He says, I observed that we essentially had a binary clinic for years, which was neurosis or psychosis, an either or, an absolute either or. Well, you also had perversion, but it didn't weigh on the same scale, essentially because true perverts don't really analyze themselves, so what you have in analysis are subjects with perverse traits. Perversion is a questionable term which has been put into disarray by the gay movement and so tends to be a discarded category. So our clinic had an essentially binary character. What is he saying there but like that we got rid of the idea of perversion but for like woke political reasons, you know? Um is that what he's saying there? Because like if that's what he's saying, then like well that doesn't mean that the thing that the word described has gone
Yeah.
away. The third category that the word described, you know? Which
So
by the way, after reading Seminar 4, I'm like, what the fuck is the big deal? Like it's not like Lacan is saying there that like all homosexuals are perverts. That's not what he's saying.
no, not at all.
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
But here's the thing, right? Uh, if you say that the majority of feminine subjects are hysterics, there's a lot of women who are going to be pissed off by that too.
mm. But
These
that's a good
terms,
thing in Lacan. That's
I
good.
know,
Like
I
we
know,
want, like
and
the
that's,
goal is to be a hysteric, right? Like,
but this is where you mix the problem. This is where technical jargon comes into conflict with the colloquial usage.
yeah,
And yeah, like using the term pervert for a certain structure of subjectivity is fine. You start calling gay men perverts, yeah, and that's why there's like, no, that's not a
yeah,
good signifier. And the
yeah,
same thing if you walk around telling women all the time you're just being hysterical, they're
yeah,
going to be pissed off, and rightfully so.
yeah,
So this is a example of like, no, the technical jargon's doing something technical, and it's, when you go to in a situation that's colloquial, it's
yeah,
best to not use it or be very specific in how you tell people, hey, this is not the typical definition I'm working with. But um what's going on there is, on the one hand, yeah, I think you're right. Certain people didn't like being called perverts, rightfully so.
hmm
And so let's get rid of the term. The other thing though, and when I was at LAC a few months back, I had the opportunity to talk to a clinical Lacanian named Ethan. And Ethan, it was one of the best conversations I've had in a long time,
mm,
because we started talking about all the stuff we're talking about now, but his perspective is that of a clinician.
hmm
And it's so great as a, some kind of Lacanian theorist to actually talk to a clinician. And it's even better when you get a clinician who respects Lacanian theorists, so you can have
mm,
a real meaningful exchange. But Ethan told me, he goes, no, look, in my time in the clinic, I might have had one pervert. I believe this is what he said. He was like, the point was, perverts are so rare
mm,
because perverts, based on their certainty that what they're doing is right, they don't seek analysis.
right,
So, yeah, they're out there, but psychoanalysts have long said, like, perverts are the rarest clinical structure.
yeah,
You typically do have, it's basically a bunch of neurotics, and then you get some psychotics.
mm,
And finding a pervert's very, very rare. If you do find one, typically they're men.
hmm
And I think there's
and they're probably not going
structural
to find
reasons.
you is the problem, right?
Yeah, so they're not going to go to analysis
Yeah,
because they're operating on the basis that they know for certain what's best, not just for themselves but for society as a whole. So no, they don't have a problem.
hmm yeah,
So yeah, whereas a psychotic knows on some level something is not right or working here. And neurotic knows all too well that things aren't working perfectly for them.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's what's going on there, is that perverts actually are, statistically speaking, very, very rare.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess there's a little bit more than the like a woke politics thing going on
Yeah,
there,
there
because
is.
because what he describes, Malaire describes in the rest of the essay is as analysts consistently finding people who they cannot properly fit within the categories of psychotic or neurotic, and so the need for there to be a third category, which apparently perversion is either too gauche or it just doesn't fit, and I can't tell which is more the case, whether it's considered too gauche or it doesn't fit what they're seeing, you know. So that
I
that
think also
essay
just
is
like,
pretty interesting as far as like ordinary psychosis as this third category, and I think that has something to do with what Dwayne Russell
it
and
does.
Murphy
It
is
has
talking
something to
about.
do with what you're concerned with, which
Mhm.
is this breakdown in social connectivity,
Mhm. Yeah.
where you have the isolated individual, whether we want to call them narcissists
Thanks.
or what's up, Mark?
Hi, Mikey.
How you doing?
Hi, Evan.
So, but no, it has to do. We're talking about it. A fragmented subject is what we're doing in these cases, and we're trying to understand what are the structural dynamics bringing this about. And I mean, look, we've talked about atomization,
Mhm.
but there's other terms we can bring in. Is it commodification? Does this? Is it industrialization that does it?
Mhm.
Uh, is it uh, the demystification of nature is at play here? Is it science? Is it a connection between science and capitalism?
Mm.
There's this whole range of ways to approach this question of why do we now, especially like you said earlier, in this era of social media where we have so many ways to connect to other people, why do
Yeah.
we feel so alone?
Mhm. Mhm.
And why do we feel like all we have
You, you
are ourselves?
you know what? Like Freud says, I think in ego, um, I think in group psychology, he talks about no, I think it's in On Narcissism. Um, I think he talks about like love being like when you don't feel something along these lines, like when you don't feel like you have measured up um to the ego ideal, when you don't feel like you're measuring up, like love is like when you find somebody who seems to complete what the ego ideal is asking of you. You know what I mean? So if we don't live in a world with ego ideals, is it even possible to fall in love? If Freud is right about what love, what this romantic attachment means, you
I mean,
know?
that's very, I mean, the way, so in the intro to Lash's Culture of Narcissism that Daniel
Hmm.
Tutt did that I watched earlier today, he defines it like that.
Yeah.
Culture of narcissism is a breakdown in ego ideal, which is to
Yeah. Yeah.
say,
Yeah. Tut's good on that. Yeah. I agree there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's really good. So it's this breakdown in some sort of other having the ideal version of myself that I'm trying to aspire to. So
Hmm.
an ego ideal of somebody else would be, um, if your parent wants you to grow up and be a good citizen, you could say,
Hmm.
okay, so it's not about whatever I want to be on some idiosyncratic level.
Hmm.
First and foremost, I have to live up to the ideal the other person has of me.
Hmm.
Now, of course, the ego ideal is the ideal of the person who's embodying the big other. So
Yeah.
this is where you have like, I'm living up to a social external value and
Hmm.
not some idiosyncratic enjoyment and not some narcissistic investment in my own
Yeah.
self-image.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an external social goal, which
Yeah.
puts a sense of social duty on you
Yeah.
that's above and beyond your own individual proclivities.
And so what characterizes our age more than that there are no ego ideals, no common ideals of family, class, or nation that we feel like are worth living up to?
Well, part of it isn't it because the vast majority of people are just struggling in wage labor and they can't be anything more than just, I mean, if you're a neurotic, you're not trying to be the instrument of anybody. You don't want to be an object. You want to be a desiring subject. And that would entail being able to explore different ideals, to drift around, and it not drift in some aimless sense, but to be able to change, to develop based on where your desire takes you. And if your desire can't ever escape just the working grind of trying to pay the rent, trying to have enough food to live on, and if that's what your life is reduced to, then no, you kind of abandon anything higher because materially speaking, there's no road to it.
Right. Right. I think there's definitely something to that. But then what distinguishes like our era like from like I don't know, the Great Depression when it didn't necessarily seem like ego ideals were all dead, where it seemed like no, this is in some way maybe an opportunity to create new ego ideals or something like this. You know what I mean? Like why is our response the way it is? Like why isn't our response like let's organize ourselves, and out of that organization an ego ideal would be spontaneously produced? You know, why is the impulse to disconnect rather than to connect?
Right. Well, I think the difference there is, okay, you take the old school, you know, 1930s vision of the worker. Yeah, they're in wage labor like we are, but outside of wage labor, what do you do? Like in a sense, you don't have,
Yeah.
it's like time is
Yeah.
more is saturated for us. So there's shit you feel like you have to do every second, even when you're not working. You feel some social consumerist imperative to keep up with all the shows on Netflix. Oh, you got to watch this, you got to watch that. And then, so it's like, if you're in wage labor, you're doing productive work. And
Right.
then when you go home, you have to do your consumer work.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's harder to
Yeah.
actually aspire to anything.
The superego is way more prevalent now. That's what it comes down
Yes.
to, right?
And they
As the
didn't really
injunction to
hit till
enjoy.
post-war era.
Yeah, totally. And so
So if you got
it's
off work
amusing
in the
ourselves to death,
1930s,
isn't it? Like,
think about it. It is
yeah,
amusing ourselves to death. And the
yeah.
pressure that we feel to enjoy all the time is extra labor.
Yeah.
And the people in the 30s, did they feel that? I don't think so. I think when they got off work,
They're fucking bored.
or they sat around the bar and had
Yeah.
conversations, but they
Yeah.
didn't feel like they had to go do other stuff in the name of fun.
Yeah.
That we have, like, I have to know what's, everybody at work, Stranger Things is going to be, we got to watch Stranger Things, right?
Yeah.
There's the consumer duty. And if you don't keep up with that shit, I'm sorry, we are, even though we feel isolated and fragmented, we're still social animals. Speak like that. So you want to keep up. You want to be able to have the conversations with your coworkers, to have any sense of like, oh, look, I feel like I belong to something for a minute. We can talk about the same TV show. That's how starved we are for community. And so you have those moments that you really do want to be able to talk about it because it's fun and everybody, you want to partake in that. So you got to do that work after work.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the only person who's different is it's this. I'm going to say this for lack of a better word, because I think that it's not a strict understanding of the term, but like the only person who's not like that is the like generalized autist. You know what I mean? Like the person who's like, it's really obsessional, but like the person who's like obsessed over their special interests. The person who just does not give a shit about like the small talk around the water cooler, so to speak. I feel like that's the only person who's not like that. And so maybe obsessional is sort of the way out. But I don't know how you create a movement of obsessionals, like a political movement of any kind.
Give them substance. Give them something worth obsessing over. I think that's it for me. First of all, it's the disavowal of expenditure, the disavowal of like the actual material reality of society. Not on the side of the consumer, but on the side of the big other, we'll say. Like on the side of the commodity. The commodity lies about the fact that it cost money, it cost resources, it cost lithium. They're saying, yeah, buy our car. It's good for the planet. It's like, no, it's not. So it's like the disavowal and there's just nothing to do. Like everybody knows everything sucks, and we just ironically engage with it because there's nothing else to do. And so people sit around and you have this injunction to watch Stranger Things. And a lot of people really enjoy it, but a lot of people they enjoy talking shit. They we enjoy being miserable.
I don't believe that anybody likes IPAs, but on the West Coast, they're fucking everywhere. Everyone is drinking them all the time, and I think nobody likes them. I think everyone thinks they taste like shit to everyone, and yet everyone drinks them at the same time.
I did used to enjoy them.
Convinced of this. Absolutely convinced of this.
But I enjoyed stouts too.
Yeah. But like, because you have to drink the IPA. It's a chore. Even if you don't agree with me on the particular example, like, you know what I mean. You must drink it. It doesn't matter whether you're having a good time or enjoying it, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do and enjoying. It's like the image of ourselves as enjoying is more important than ourselves actually enjoying or having a good time.
Yeah, well, and I do think we have learned how to enjoy the impossibility of enjoyment.
What is porn but a symptom of sexual repression? Like that, it is sexual repression.
Yeah, and like the gooners,
because we're not fucking. That's why we're watching porn.
And the gooners aren't even sexually gratified. Like their gratification comes from they're not getting off. Like they get off on not getting off.
Yeah. Totally, which is totally also like Martin Luther going to confession and annoying the shit out of his whatever you call him, whoever's in charge of monks, annoying the shit out of his superior by constantly going to confession over and over again about like little tiny useless infractions, like clearly enjoying your own repression. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because he's given himself too much trouble. That is a definition of jouissance.
Yeah. And so his superior was like, stop coming to confession until you have something to confess, you fucking weirdo. Like other people come to confession when they've done something. You're just like, oh, I looked at a girl's ankle on accident and I need to confess that. He's like, shut up. Like, leave me alone.
Well, that's where the point is, and this is this great Lacanian insight, is that's where the prohibition becomes a source of enjoyment itself. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So asceticism becomes the very source of how you give yourself too much trouble in the name of not giving yourself too much trouble. And so this is this weird thing our libidinal economies can do, is the very thing that seems to be depriving us of enjoyment becomes the source of enjoyment.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
So what do we do? I mean, talking about this, I do think it's a good way to analyze society or maybe political economy. I don't know.
You know what? I think the moment. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And if you're in the middle of a thought.
No, go for it.
Okay. I feel like the point we're at is like, okay, are we all narcissists? Are we all perverts? Are we all neurotics? Like, I almost feel like, what if we're in just this point of like, destitution, where it's just like we aren't anything. It's almost like you can decide what you're gonna be. In a way, like you can decide what your subjectivity is going to be to a certain extent. You can be like, you you can't be a hysteric right now, I feel like, but you can choose like, am I going to be an obsessional or am I going to be a pervert? Like which of these sort of impulses or options that I have in front of me can I choose? You know what I mean? Maybe not literally, but
But
something
no,
like
I
that.
think you're right, and
Yeah.
this is what I was getting at earlier. So I've even in one of the things I wrote, I was talking about multi-structure disorder,
Hmm.
and because here's the thing, it seems like depending on our where we're at, we vacillate between them. So,
Hmm.
and that quote that you read. So, okay, we've already established trying to figure out the relationship between the individual clinical structure and the institutional clinical structure is an issue, right?
Hmm.
So, if I let's put it like this, like if in my individuality I'm an obsessional, but I go, I'm part of a political party that has a perverted dynamic to it. It's as if like when I go and I lose myself in that specific big other, I take
Hmm.
on the perverted structure temporarily, and then when I leave it, I fade back to my obsessional default setting,
Totally.
right? But then we get this other problem that the quote you cited gets at. So not only can I be an obsessional, but I can be an obsessional with pervert characteristics.
Hmm.
Now you get into this other thing where it's like, well, okay, if I'm an obsessional, but I can also have pervert characteristics, but I'm not clinically structured as a pervert, then what's the dynamics there? So, I
Hmm.
mean, I'm an obsessional. Can I have hysterical characteristics as an obsessional? Can I have sadist? Can I have psychotic characteristics as an like? And my point is, I've never seen any of this systematically worked out and thought through by a Lacanian.
Maybe it isn't systematic though. Like maybe like I don't think that you would have that hard of a time convincing or talking to a psychoanalyst and getting them to say like, look, what your psychological structure has comes down to is like not exclusively but partly what your social surroundings are, and so like you might sort of vacillate between different subjectivities. Like the whole point of like ordinary psychosis and Jacques, that essay Jacques-Alain Miller, is that like analysts are having a really hard time placing people. Like that's the whole point of it. It's like they can't figure out, are these people, these are analysts who are having a hard time figuring out, are these people neurotics or psychotics? And like spending years not being able to figure out, how do I place this person? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's like subject, like the categories are only gonna work so far. Like there's gonna be situations of like liminal situations, and maybe perhaps more so in the moment we are in now, where it's like we're kind of in this like psychically destitute sort of place where it's like it's very indeterminate. It feels very, everything about the world feels very indeterminate, very in limbo, you
See, I
know.
like that a lot more than talking about generalized foreclosure or something like that.
I still don't even know like what the fuck that means. Cause like why would you choose? I guess I don't know the difference between like what is this castration anguish in perversion? What is the difference between that and foreclosure of the name of the father? Because both of them have to do with the phallus, have some relation to do with the name of the father, etc. But I think it
Yeah.
seems like it seems like it's like different levels of the father or something like that. Because like Lacan talks about there being an imaginary father and a symbolic father, and they're different, you know, and a real father as
So
well.
much of this boils down to just our lack of meaningful social bonds that give pave the way to social duty
Yeah.
and a subjectivity that values something above and beyond itself more than it
Hmm.
values its own desire.
So
And
yeah.
yeah,
So is the obsessional the road to social duty? Is the obsessive position, is that the like pre-revolutionary position? Like out of obsessionals will give birth to hysterics?
well, maybe, but I mean the point is to okay, typically speaking, most masculine subjects are obsessionals. Typically speaking, most
Hmm.
feminine subjects are hysterics. The issue with the obsessional, and it's true, obsession, right? It's people who fixate on trying to fulfill the demand of the other. The problem
Hmm.
is when you fixate on, oh, if I okay, this is my duty, this is what's demanded of me. All I've got to do is focus on that. What you end up doing is blocking out the other, because there's always desire underneath a demand. And so if you fixate on the demand, that's your way of not recognizing the real alterity of the other.
Oh,
What are you
it's
thinking,
like,
Nance?
yeah, go ahead, Nance.
I just that in our conversation with Todd the other day, we talked about Girard versus Lacan and this mimetic desire as taking the demand as gospel.
All there is.
Denying the desire underneath. And I wonder, it, like, a lot of this to me seems like it comes from like a lack of contact with the world. So it's like you're always in fantasy. Like the average person is always in fantasy space. Even the worker, you go through work, you do your productive work, and then you come home and you do your productive consumption. You're in fantasy land all day. There's no prohibition. Like, even if you hate your job, you could put headphones in and listen to a book or listen to a podcast or listen to music or whatever. But it is, there's no negation, or maybe there's no prohibition. Like, we're moving towards pure positivity. And Mikey and I, we've been talking a lot about AIs and how they operate in this way. Like, it is just pure positivity. There's no difference. There's no negation. There's no lack. And I just wonder, like, could it be possible that we're changing subjectivity because the, like, social behaviors, like, it's not just that the big other is this pervert, although I think that's a huge part of it. But what if we are changing? What if subjectivity itself is diminishing because we're playing this game where we're just imitating and we're just reacting to superficial pure positivity? There is no desire. It's all demand. Could it be that the human is devolving?
So yeah, becoming machine.
Yeah.
Because the three clinical structures are structures of subjects. They're different subjects, but if you become more and more integrated into the algorithmic flow of the machine at large, it's wouldn't that be a destructuring of subjectivity altogether?
I mean, I think so, and I don't know. Like, why are we having trouble placing people? Well, maybe people aren't people right now. Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah. Look, I don't want to say that in a way that anybody would think I'm trying to be normative or trying to moralize. Although, fuck it, I am trying to be normative and I am trying to moralize. I think people are fucking awesome, and I think we should be people, and I think we should reject this drive towards pure positivity. So yeah, fuck it. I will moralize.
Moralizing gets a bad rap because what do people mean when they say that? Like, if you just mean representing any sense of morality at all in the world, then, like, okay, fuck you, you're post-human. You know what I mean? If that's what you mean, if that's what someone means when they say you're moralizing, I'm like, everyone should be moralizing all the time if that's what moralizing means, and that's sometimes the way in which people use it.
If moralizing means in the way because I think the way colloquially it gets used is somebody who's being overly severe in their critique of somebody else's behavior, so much so that you can tell they're getting enjoyment from tearing the other person down.
Totally.
Yeah, that sucks.
But people say anything anytime you complain about, like, the state of the world or how people are, like, people will say anything's moralizing.
Yes,
that's what I mean. Like, people think everything, any criticism of, like, virtue or lack thereof, anything at all, any type of, like, criticism of another person's behavior at all is moralizing.
Well, I know that side of it too, because when I say something along the lines of the world ought not be like this or it ought to be like this, you'll be met quickly with people. Who do you think you are? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
We're all suspicious.
So basically, it's like, don't be an ought. Don't assert oughts. Well,
ever. Yeah.
We're
you kind of can't escape
as
ought, dude. Like, the ought is inescapable. Sorry, dude.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize how much that they miss an ought. Like that's sort of the root of um, a lot of our like symptoms of being like just subjectively destitute, being lost, being like trying to reconstitute ourselves in ways that are narcissistic or perhaps perverse. Like the root of these like weird symptoms that are hard to pin down, this like vague sense of emptiness that Lash talks about, like, um, what is that? But like we have no ought,
Mm,
or if there are oughts, they're not oughts that we give a fuck about because they're these like old dead oughts that only weirdos associate themselves with, like,
mm,
which is the way I think most people relate to church. This weird old dead ought that like, why are you, that like has no place in my life. I'm just saying, I think most people that's how they see church, and so the only oughts that exist feel like they're dead, feel like they're irrelevant, you know, for most people, I think.
yeah, that's why I do think it does matter to do this kind of like phenomenological analysis of like the experience of what it is to be human, and just fess up to the fact that there is an ought, like along with the human, you can experience the ought, and I think we can develop some type of universal ought machine that grounds us all, in the peopleness, the humanness, and yeah, I do think a lot of people relate to religion superficially in that way, because we're all seeking, because like the world, there is nothing. You go outside and there's just nothing. Like it's a fucking wasteland.
Yeah, it's a moral wasteland, like in the sense of like a desert, a moral desert.
Yeah. But we, rather than find a way to solve that issue, like we bend over backwards and do all kinds of crazy gymnastics to get off on the desert itself, and we're all out here and like we're all suspicious of everyone else, and we're like, yeah, I didn't fall for that, everything sucks. Like it's resignation to the inevitable, rather than, I don't know, just saying, hey dude, like things suck right now and that hurts my feelings, and I want to be honest and say I'm sad, but I don't believe we've lost yet. Like I do still think there is a human underneath all the layers of commodity and subjectivization, or that's not even the right way to say that, but yeah, the drive to be the perfect consumer, because that's all there is left. We don't have pathways to edification or actualization in our family. Raising a family is ridiculously expensive. It costs money that people just don't have. People in our condition will never.
A family is a luxury item.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say it, dude.
Totally, dude. A family is the phallus right now. In our
Right now,
world.
yeah.
Like, yeah, totally. Like having a family is like the ultimate fucking flex in a way.
And it's
like
insane.
Right now, specifically,
Like that's such a constructive thing. That's such a human thing to have a family. But it's been locked away behind economic shit that people are just locked away from. I'm sorry, dude. I have kids and I've been lucky. I've been privileged. I've also done a lot of dumb shit, but I've been lucky enough to not have to see them suffer. That's a privilege. That's a luxury.
Yeah.
Billions of people in the world are just fucking suffering, dude. And it's not.
The family's locked behind 127 paywalls.
Totally. But I'm not saying that by the way, I'm not saying that the family is only the phallus. The family is only a flex.
No.
I'm just saying one of the things that the family is that, just to be clear.
Well, and even like art and music and skateboarding and fucking all this human activity has been turned into an economic game. So like you can't even get satisfaction and edification in making art. because it's so hard to do. It's so expensive to maintain, and it takes up so much of your resources. And we're just on all the time. Produce, consume, produce, consume, produce, consume. Yeah, it sucks. And we should fucking do something about it instead of just being like, ha 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 ha. Yeah, let's fuck. No, dude, we should be upset about the world we live in. We shouldn't, I don't know, try to hide it.
I can tell you this. One of the issues, and this is probably the thing that annoys me the most about certain of my coworkers, is they're mad if you're mad. They don't want you to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
Because it triggers something in them where it makes them feel like they have some social duty or obligation to be mad, but in their minds they don't have it in them to carry that. They don't have it emotionally, they don't have it temporally, they don't have it energetically, they don't have it in them to care about something more or better for the world. And you being mad about it reminds them of it, and then they're mad at you for reminding them about it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I feel like the only people who are like okay with being mad, or like okay, or even just having an open-minded conversation about like things being shitty or anything, like in my experience, has been like very fucking poor people. Very poor people, you know? Like working poor, like the level of income that the Gallaghers are, like those people are the only people in my experience generally who are like confronting reality, because they can't help it. They can't help but confront reality every day. It's smacking them in the face all the fucking time.
Well, my what I say to them is, look, guys, you're not talking. You guys are not the deadbeats that you guys will bitch about, or the people who live off the system. You guys have worked your asses off your entire lives, and you still don't have futures. If you're not pissed off about that, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
because
but you know what? It's so easy to put it on yourself. Like it's so easy, and the culture encourages us to do it sometime to make it our own fault. You know, because we all know we could have done something different. Like it's true. We all know we could have made different moves in our life. We could have done different things and put ourselves in a different, if I had just taken that opportunity and instead I decided not to. We do know that there are things we could have done differently. And so that leaves just enough of the door open that it can be like that, then like the ideology of the system that can just kick it down and be like, fuck you, you're a piece of shit. You know what I mean?
But here's what I say to them, because they'll start doing the personal responsibility thing.
Yeah.
I'll say, okay, so even if you're willing to do you could have done better, made better choices. Let me ask you something. How many people in this society do you personally know that have robust futures?
Yeah. Dude.
And they sit there and they have nothing to say.
Dude,
so if it was such a thing to just work a little bit harder and be a little bit more responsible, you'd know a plethora of people with robust futures. I don't know anybody with a robust future.
Yeah.
So
dude, that's why there's this guy who's he's an English dude. I don't remember his name right now, but like he's this English dude who grew up in like a total poor working class neighborhood and just like happens to have a super fucking high IQ and managed to become like one of the like a super high end like investment trader, like Wall Street trader at like a super big bank and shit, and like it became like a hedge fund manager or whatever. But he was like, look, this has not dictated his politics at all, or like the way he sees the world. He's like, look, of the people I grew up with, I'm the only one who has a future now. That is not good odds. That is shit odds. You know what I mean? That has to do with like I'm a fucking weird anomaly. In
has to do with structure.
And in terms of both luck and in terms of like some innate gift that just happens in this particular circumstance happens to like lead to an immense amount of money. You know what I mean? Like those are, but even he was like, those odds are so bad that like this is an untenable situation we're all in, and this is someone who made it. You know what I mean? In every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think we just like, but because maybe part of the problem though is because we constantly, like I said in my narcissism essay, like we relate to the world as abstractions. Like that's all we do. Like if we relate to people on the other side of the political aisle as complete abstractions because we mediate our entire social lives through the corporate media, through these devices. We even relate with our prospective mates and partners as abstractions. That's how we find people anymore. Apparently, it's unacceptable to go up and just talk to people because we have to do it all through dating apps. Like we're
Well, if you just
relating.
talk to somebody, you're a creep.
Yeah, you're a fucking weirdo. So it's like everything is related through abstractions. And so like we're not engaging with, I was going somewhere with this. There was really a point. But like I guess our entire social world is just, that's how it's set up. And so it's like it's very easy to not see the world realistically is the point, really. Like it's very easy to not see the world. Like it's easier to see the world through the abstraction of the couple people on TV who have made it than it is to see the world for what it is by looking at your neighbor who fucking hasn't, The abstractions are more real.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, I got me thinking about the precession of the simulacrum, or the precession of the image, talking about like we only relate to the abstraction now, and the abstraction has come to replace the ground reality, or maybe it's the case that the ground reality was never really there in the first place. And I think that is the symptom of modernity, is the hyper reality. Like that is what modernity leads to when the society, the economy, the machine, whatever, is geared at productivity for the purpose of exchange, for the purpose of more productivity, for the purpose of exchange. Like it is this Ouroboros of capital, MCM prime. Nothing else is real. Like in the world we live in today, all our little human endeavors, they're real to us. But when it comes to species level structures, they're not real. Like the only thing that matters is capital. All the money that's expended, or all the money that's spent, all the energy that's expended, all the labor hours that are worked, and all the deaths and everything. Like it's just to serve capital in prime. And I think that's the modernity that we got, but I don't think that's like a necessary outcome of modernity and globalization and industrialization and all that. Like I think capital could lead to some good things, but it definitely has led us to more bad than good right now. But like I wonder, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm wondering. Like it's just at this point where now I am kind of floating in this void of like nothing is real outside of me, but it not even me. Like it is my relation to the commodity is really what matters. For me, because I can't even invest in the things that actually matter to me. I only am allowed to invest in what matters to the big other. Like it's this weird like back and forth relationship of nothing is real, but you have to keep pursuing it all anyway. I don't know what happens if you don't. Well, I mean, you could do the Ligotti thing, right? But I don't know. That's not satisfying.
What's the Ligotti thing? What's this?
Reject human existence.
Yeah. Do the virulent nihilist thing. And shit. Just the other day, Mikey and I were talking, and I was like, I am a nihilist, but I'm a I'm a gleeful nihilist. I'm a happy nihilist. I'm a celebrant nihilist. Like, the fact that I'm a nihilist means I'm free to make or discover. I'm not making, hard claims out here, but I am free to pursue my own meaning because I am a nihilist. But a lot of people hear the word nihilism and they think Ligotti, and they think Linkola, and they think, oh, you have to be sad.
That's what you have to be, a doomer
Yeah.
if you're going to be a nihilist or a pessimist. And I'm still a pessimist in some way. I don't think that'll
Sure.
probably ever change. But look, I think what so many people are feeling is this: there's nothing I can do to affect the way capital changes the world, and there's nothing I can do to affect the way that capitalism keeps things the same. And that's where this sense of hopelessness and resignation comes from. I can't change the way capitalistic change occurs, and I can't change the way that capitalistic stasis occurs. And if that's true, then I guess I live my little life knowing I could have been more. And it's that or suicide. I think that's where people are at existentially.
Yeah.
Now, taking that,
Oh, go ahead, Nance.
taking that and thinking about this structure of society, or the structure of the big other, or the superego. I don't even know at this point. Is the superego the pervert, or is the big other the pervert, or is the problem that they're both perverted right now?
It would be more like you could connect. There's a type of perversion. Superego and perversion's easier to connect.
Yeah. And I wonder if the big other becoming perverted is where the problem is kind of coming from. But I don't know.
Or that the big other, the way they would talk about the decline in the efficacy or, efficiency of the big other.
Yep.
The big other can't give us a sense of social duty above and beyond ourselves, something that we think is worth living and dying for. Oops, sorry. So something we feel is worth living or dying for. And that's part of the issue, is that, people have their little lives, but there's nothing bigger that they're a part of. And that's where the real sense of lack comes into play.
Mike, is for the obsessional, is it, like what you said about the obsessional sounded like, is Heisenberg from Breaking Bad a perfect example of the obsessional? Or at the end where he is forced to admit when he's having this conversation with his wife after have you guys seen this show? I'm gonna spoil it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've seen it many times.
I never.
Okay.
You've never watched Breaking?
Well, close your ears if you don't want to hear a spoiler or whatever. But like,
No, I know. Here's the thing. I know how to say it. Okay.
Yeah.
The confession of enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're talking about.
Where
Yes.
he's forced to admit, like, look, it's not about taking care of my family. He's forced to admit, no, it was for me all the time. Is that the obsessional?
Now, I don't think I wouldn't hold that up as an example of. Well, see, here's the thing. I think Todd and Ryan did an episode where they talked about Breaking Bad, and I think they would say, yeah, that's like, he's not really living his desire. He's living some sort of demand of the other. And so maybe they would say it's obsessional. I don't agree with Todd and Ryan on this one. I really think that was his desire. He wanted to be a badass, a fucking gangster. He wanted that.
Yeah.
And look, I think the way you can problematize it is, well, that's basically desiring a phallic identity, and that's not real subjectivity. You can do that, but I think it misses just the basics of it, which is he was a nerdy guy who always felt like he compromised what he wanted out of life. And he wanted to be the type of guy that asserted himself and fought for what he wanted. And he fucking did it. And
He
so
did not give
again,
ground on his desire.
he didn't. And so
Yeah.
Todd would totally give me shit for this. I think Walter is actually an example of an ethical hero in a
I think
sense.
so. I totally
I-
think so. Yeah, it's
Just in
like
the sense that I don't care. This is what I want
yeah.
and I'm going for it. And
It-
the problem is if you do that, that's the issue. If you don't compromise your desire, somebody's probably gonna get hurt.
Mm.
And so this is where you face up to the Lacanian ethics of desire in a way that, yeah, if somebody actually follows their desire and doesn't compromise it, there can be problems from that. But if they don't, if they do compromise their desire, they're going to live a shell of like
yeah.
a shell of themselves is what
Yeah.
the issue is. And so typical ethicists would just say something like, oh, you have to sacrifice in the name of your duty. You have to compromise your desire. You have to, the utilitarians, what's best for the collective, blah, blah, blah. But what Lacan discovered is, no, there is a type of ethics towards self. And it is the ethics of what you want. What you want could actually hurt other people. It could be destructive. It could be, but if you don't pursue it, you're going to eat yourself up by not doing it. So what it is really is, and what I've taken from it, it's not like this is just the only ethics to do, but it sheds light on what goes on in a person. It helps make sense of other people because sometimes people are going to choose to compromise their desire and we're going to say that's heroic. And then there's going to be situations where people refuse to compromise their desire and we're going to say that's heroic.
Mhm.
And the problem is often there's a contradiction between those two choices. And yet, I think if we're going to do ethics, we have to reckon with how both of them, the person who sacrifices their desire, the person who stubbornly insists on their desire, how both of them can occupy this ethical position at certain times. And here's the thing, I think they both can, from another perspective, be unethical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the soldier who just follows orders, even though it goes against every impulse and every desire in that person, we would say there's something cowardly in that person, even though they're technically fulfilling their social duty.
Yeah.
Richard Ramirez, he didn't compromise his desire. He went full force, and we would say that's the most unethical type of thing a person can do. So the point is,
Right.
it gets
But-
very complicated.
But we admire, like deep down, we
That's why
admire fucking Jeffrey Dahmer. We do.
I know. That is why we
do.
watch these documentaries.
Over and over again.
so-
There's so many of them. Like
I'm going to send you this thing at some point. I've written a thing on this. I want
Yeah.
you to read it. I would
Oh,
like to know
sure.
what you think.
yeah.
But yeah,
I'd love to.
I've always been interested since I was even a kid.
Yeah.
It was always one of these weird things about pop culture where I'm like, what is the fixation with serial killers?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's two fixations. We're fixated with gangsters. We love our
Mhm.
gangster movies and we love serial killers. You know who we don't put in movies or we don't care about? We don't care about mass shooters. We don't know their
Mm.
names. We don't remember them. We don't give a fuck. Right?
Yeah.
What is it about gangsters and what is it about serial killers that get movies made about them?
Fucking desire.
Because
Desire.
the
Because
mass shooter
mass
is just
shooter, the mass shooter is just suicide. That's all they're doing. They're just committing suicide and involving some more people in their suicide.
and it's
That's
an
fucking
expression
lame.
of weakness.
Pussy shit.
It's an expression of weakness
Yeah.
in the sense of society, things didn't go my way, so I'm going to try to shoot at the big other. Because they shoot at anybody because everybody's the big other, everybody's Dossman. And the point is, it's a laughable act because you can't hit what you're shooting at.
Yep. Yep.
So first off, it's stupid. Secondly, it's cowardly. So
Mhm.
nobody remembers these fuckers' names.
No.
I mean, unless you're a journalist or something, but they don't have names like Al
Dude.
Capone and Jeffrey Dahmer have names.
And in fact, we should lean into that as a society. Like when you say we don't remember their names, yeah, and the news shouldn't even tell us who their names are, because that's the only reason why kids are still doing this, because they see, oh look, they got on the news, so my life doesn't mean anything either. Fuck it, I'm a piece of shit too. I'm going to go out like that kid who was on the news, you know? Like at
Yeah.
least they're famous, you know, for a minute.
But see, but yeah, for half a second,
Yeah,
it's
no,
like you don't become an icon.
no, you don't. You don't. But what they see is like, look, someone knows their name. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's what I honestly think the media reporting on mass shootings is what causes them, like to a certain extent, you know?
Look, part of this also goes this whole thing that we've been talking about. Um, I guess my last thing I'll say on it is just this is that when Daniel Tutt was talking about cultural narcissism, well, I kind of prefer the term structural narcissism, but that's just me. Um, he talked about it as this disappearance of ego ideals, which is to say values or ideals beyond ourselves in the other, in other people, other groups, etc. And so the cultural narcissist is somebody walking around who doesn't have any ideals that come from the other. But I think there's a way you can put an interesting conceptual twist on this. What if it's not that the narcissist doesn't have cultural ideals? It's that the ideals have drifted from their typical reference, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, school teacher, local neighbor, etc., to celebrity. Like
The abstractions of people.
yes, and here's the thing with the problem. Like if Tupac or Bob Dylan or whoever, whatever celebrity, right? It doesn't matter. Or whatever cultural icon is your ego ideal. The thing is, you never knew that person. You know images of them on a screen, and that's not them.
Yep.
And so it
Totally.
can't function. The ego ideal, even if you do have ego ideals that are rooted in celebrities or influencers, etc., they can't function in the way that a grounded, embodied ego ideal in someone you actually know and engage with in your day-to-day life, they can't function the same. So I just would say that would be one thing I would want to bring into this, is that the ego ideal has become rooted in celebrity images that can't give anything back to you. I mean,
yeah, the ego ideal, it's like the ego ideal of mass society, you know?
right.
That's
Exactly.
and that's and Christopher Lash talks about that too. He talks about the cult of celebrity and that being a problem of the
Okay.
culture of narcissism. So I think that's right on, like right
Okay.
on the money, you know.
Okay.
Well, I think that supports your point, Sean, that community is a good thing, actually. Community-based, actually, and not community, the community that we have access to today, but legit, this idealized version of community. What is a community? A community is a thing that manages to incorporate the difference, and it still becomes a holistic whole nevertheless, and we don't have access to that. We should strive for that. And if we're actually striving for real communities that operate in this way, this more holistic way, like we might discover or develop kind of ideals and values that are rooted in the real or rooted in the other, as opposed to being rooted in the commodity. Because like I think that's it. Like it is the commodity at the end of the day that we're coming to value and idolize more than anything else, because we're in the last vehicle. Paul Virilio's essay, The Last Vehicle, is one of my favorite little short pieces ever, and he describes basically my desk. It's the chair that you sit down in and you hook up to cyberspace or the internet or whatever, and you can travel the fucking cosmos without ever having to physically leave anywhere. So we have nothing but abstractions of other people. And like you have to get up and go outside and not just touch grass, but actually seek out other people whom you can overcome the difference to build something that is inclusive nevertheless. Which when you said communities based, actually initially I was like whoa, but then we talked about it and I was like, yeah, I like what you're saying. I would say it differently, but I'm totally fine with what you're saying and how you're saying it,
dude. And it's not even like community is like good. That's like community is inherently good. It's that like community is inherently human.
Yes.
And the question is, are we interested in being humans? Are we really interested in that? Because I don't think we are. I don't think we're really interested in being humans, you know? So we're not interested in having real ego ideals because we prefer our abstract ones. So there is a resistance there when you're like, hey, let's like face to face do some shit like with real people. People are like, no. I'm way more comfortable with my like fucking abstract ego ideals that like like
Yeah.
whatever it is for you, whether it's your ego ideal is fucking Tucker Carlson or Barack Obama, it doesn't fucking matter. It's just like, yeah, but neither of them are real people that you fucking know, you know? So, or, John Wayne or whatever the fuck. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, but still not an ego ideal, you know. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
And when I hate to do though, when I was a kid, but I'm gonna look like I grew up in an era where house parties were still a major thing on a weekly basis. And the thing with the house party is that everybody would be drinking and you'd end up getting a lot of people together who normally wouldn't associate. There usually would be fights, conflicts, etc. But a lot of great friendships came out of those fights, and they were zones of
Yeah.
encounters with negativity that forged lifelong friendships. And those bonds, a lot of my bonds that with people that I still consider best friends came from those dynamics. And you can't fake it, you can't simulate it. You have to go through it in order to earn those bonds. And it's like a way of paying your dues to have these
Hmm.
types of lifelong friendships. And social media can't recreate it. It can't simulate it. It can't. And the fact that in-person parties where people would meet up and most of the people you didn't know half the time, but everybody's there to, it just doesn't happen anymore. And I see this with my younger coworkers who are, my Zoomer buddies who are in their early 20s, and they're just like, they didn't have anything like this. They might have had friends come over on a weekend, and it would be a couple of them together, and then they would sit there and play their fucking video games with their headsets on and shit. But typically they just sit around their rooms by themselves, and then they game with each other with their headsets on. And the point is, people can go, well, that's just how they make friends, and you're just romanticizing your pet. No, there's a structural difference here.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to always be on the look. Did something in the past have a structural difference that created different dynamics as its fruit? Or are you just romanticizing some specific thing you did that doesn't really have any bearing? And for whatever reason, it has a nostalgic twinge to it when you think
Hmm.
there's a difference between those two
Yeah.
things. And the
Yeah.
house party did have an entirely different symbolic mechanism at work than hanging around talking to your friends online.
Hmm. Totally. And like because we live in the land of abstractions, I have to use a TV abstraction to make a point. But I'm okay with that. Is that like what we were saying about Walter White is that like it's not that he's like he's both a hero and a villain at the same time. Like depending on how you look at it, he's a piece of shit who put his family in jeopardy, or he's a fucking hero who took what he wanted. You know what I mean? And like the to me, like what's more important is like, yeah, but he's a human. You know what I mean? Like to me, that's like more important than like what I'm saying is fuck the beautiful soul argument. Like we want this beautiful soul because we're relating to the world as abstractions. We want to remain beautiful souls where we don't get our hands dirty. I'm like, no, we've got to get our fucking hands dirty. We've got to take risks and try to do shit. And some people might get hurt in the process, but that's fucking life. You know, it's not that you're setting out to go hurt people or anything, but like, no, we need to get back to like in some sense real life. Like, you know, like it sounds cheesy to say that shit, real life, because like, but that's only because the abstraction has become more real than real life, you know?
Yeah. When I think it matters to plant a flag on a hill and say this is what being human is. This is what being human entails. This is what it demands of one who aspires to be human. Because here in the world of commodity land, you don't have to work for the satisfaction of whatever immediate, in quotes, desire that you have. You have the commodity at your fingertips. Yes, of course you have to work. We work ourselves to death. But you don't have to put up with negation. You don't have to put up with prohibition. Everything is there for the taking. But being human demands patience and discipline, and it does demand sacrifice, and it does demand being able to withstand and even integrate difference in others. And talking about society in this way, or the social, or the socius, or whatever, political economy, whatever, talking about this stuff in this way, I think for me is helpful in, I don't want to say strategizing, but it actually does give me some kind of hope.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, it is true that we live in hell. We currently live in hell. But when we can analyze it, and we can talk about, material conditions, and we can talk about how those material conditions are folding back in on us, and what it's actually doing to us as subjects, as political subjects, it actually gives me a little bit of hope, because it's like, well, I see what's happening. I see what's happening to me. I see how and where and why I'm complicit in it. And because I can see all those things, I can start to develop strategies on what can I do, and what can I encourage others around me to do, and what can I support others around me when they're trying to do stuff.
Sort of like, well, are you?
Go ahead.
You got more of that? Okay. It's sort of like what I was said I was like starting with in the beginning, and like why I'm down this like path of research or whatever, is like an artist needs to know what needs to be very familiar with the materials that they're working with, like, and an organizer needs to understand the subjectivity that they're organizing. So to me, as bleak as this all is, it's the only way out is through, is the attitude I have with it. Not that I'm gonna personally organize the fucking the revolution or anything, but like I think that making this something that is out there for people to like understand better, like what's going on with us today, how have we changed? Genuinely, we are different. Our subjectivity is different than the subjectivity in history. I think we have to understand that in order to understand how to proceed. We have to understand what we're starting from and what we're starting with. I think deep down, in my bones, I think that's just so important to understand and to try and figure out,
Well, we have a lot of people who just want to retry old organizations.
Yeah.
And maybe that goes hand in hand with why things do tend to become culty. Because we don't understand that we've changed, and so we just take everything, or take, these communism or the church or fascism or what, like these old movements from history. And maybe the type of subject that we are today is just susceptible to the cult version of that. I don't know. But yeah, like admitting that we have changed, we are changing. It's not just a nostalgia for lost futures, although that's there too. But like it's actually trying to understand like the current moment that we're in, and we are atomized nodes, like just cast to the fucking cardinal directions, but we're still part of something. And I think it's going to be too late soon. I think maybe in our lifetimes, or maybe in our children's lifetimes, it'll be too late. So I think it fucking matters to be having conversations like this right now. Not just because I think anarchism is cool, although I do think that, but no, I think it's super important. I don't know. Any final thoughts? What did Jerry Springer used to, how did he close his show out? Was it final thoughts or was that Sally?
I think that was Jerry. I think it was final thoughts.
Final thoughts.
Yeah, I think it was Jerry Springer. No, I just think that I agree. I think if the human is going to launch a counteroffensive, it's going to have to do it in a way that isn't rooted in niche identities, and that there's going to have to be some sort of universal solidarity, and it's only through thinking through these contradictions in how different people are subjectively oriented that we can start to think about, like, so how could a universal solidarity emerge out of this? But the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
TikTok motherfuckers.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, it's just last thing, I guess, is that like yeah, it needs to be universal, but I don't think it's going to be one of the signifiers that has already been used.
I agree.
Ding,
I
ding,
really
ding.
don't. Can you imagine? I'm trying this example out on people. I'm like, can you really imagine? Speaking of speaking of abstractions, but it's kind of realistic in a way. The show that I already mentioned, the Gallaghers, what's it called? Shameless. Can we really imagine the Gallaghers meeting some like radical socialist revolutionary and becoming committed Bolshevik cadres? Can we really imagine that show still being good under that signifier of socialism? Like, can we imagine Fiona from that show being like, I want the glorious revolution, and like really taking that show seriously after that point?
Like Ian might have gone down that path, but he would have been
because
the
he's
only
fucking
one.
bipolar. Like,
I tried to watch that show, but it was too painful for me to watch. It was I don't know. I watched like maybe the half of the first season and fucking, round of applause to the writers. They did a good job. I could not confront that monster under my bed. So, but I've heard very good things.
Yeah.
I mean,
my point just
rates,
being. Oh, sorry. I was just my point just being like, can these old signifiers? Can we really imagine them standing up in the world we live in?
Of course
or do we need something different?
No.
That's all.
No.
Yeah.
And that's, again, so of course people like us are going to read our Marx, and we're going to learn from Marx, but
totally,
we don't have to do anything in his name. The greatest way to pay homage to Marx is to learn from him.
Dude, is to not be a Marxist.
Boom.
And
boom.
Or to not use a signifier. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, that guy's had as much influence on my thinking as anybody else has, but I mean, I work with the type of people who Marxists would say they want to organize. They're not going
They're repulsed
to take up that signifier. They're not going to do it.
It's repulsive.
Not here in America.
Yeah. No, and I think maybe the signifier doesn't matter yet. Maybe it'll emerge, or
it'll quilt. There will be a quilting moment where whatever's building gets a signifier. And I don't know if we have to have one from the get.
That's it. I think it'll only work out if it's allowed to quilt.
Well, remember, for Todd's really great at pointing this out. He makes this distinction. The master signifier is the first signifier, but the quilting point comes later.
Yeah.
So the master signifier quilts the beginning of the sentence. It's the first, but the quilting point is what retroactively determines the meaning. And so the thing is, look, we know our master signifier is capital.
Yeah.
okay, or capitalism. It is what has, it is the meaningless absolute fixed point that determines everything. Okay, the question is what signifier will come along and retroactively quilt the field of meaning to totally change how everybody views capitalism in a way that hasn't been done before.
Yep.
Now, I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
saying there won't be similarities with how certain Marxists or certain communists or whatever viewed it in the past, but it will take a new quilting point.
Totally. Yeah.
And on that note, we're going to quilt the episode. Oh, Sean's going to quilt the episode. What you got? Nope.
Oh, I guess just like, I think it could be useful to like advance provisional signifiers or quilting points, you know, like things like throw spitballs, you know, that's why I like humanism that you've been
I'm
talking
saying,
about,
dude, that's
you know?
my thing. But
Yeah.
also that's necessarily going to fail. But
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It might. It's like it probably like will not be like there will probably not be the humanist like cadres of the future. Like that will probably not be the banner. But you know what I mean? Like I think it's useful to start like spitballing. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, when a robot servant goes crazy and kills a child,
boom.
it might not be so hard to use humanism at that point.
Well,
It might not.
Once the average everyday person starts to care about it, then yeah. But I mean, it'll probably be something really cool, and we'll probably all be dead by the time it ever kicks in anyway. So
Maybe.
yeah,
On that note.
yeah. Don't die yet, audience. Go fucking hang out with someone outside. Don't just go outside. Go fucking hang out with someone and actually like put your phone down and like ask them about their day or something. I don't know. Fuck, I don't know.